action. So even though I saw it in theaters, and at the time there were multiple songs from it playing on the radio throughout its theatrical run, I could still not tell you a single song from The Greatest Showman. I think one of the songs is called Greatest Show, actually. And it goes something like, "This is the greatest show, da 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 night, da 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 da," and that's all I can remember. And I remember that because it was all throughout the trailers, and it actually has that nice little rise and fall thing there. And I remember that section of that song and nothing else about that song. Oh, and ladies and gents, this is the moment you've been waiting for. That part. I remember that part. I know that there was a song about letting your freak flag fly, kind of like thing, but it wasn't as good as letting your freak flag fly from Shrek the Musical, because I haven't even seen all of Shrek the Musical, and I only know that one song from Shrek the Musical, but I know that song, and I don't know this one. There was that cool dance scene with Zac Efron and Hugh Jackman with the shot glasses. That was fun. I remember that. That was hype. When I finished watching it, there were some teenagers who really enjoyed it. They thought it was cool that the actors were singing. Um, um, One time, when I was grocery shopping, I heard a song over the intercom, and this was even recently, and I was like, I know that song. Where have I heard that song before? And I looked it up, and it was from The Greatest Showman, and I didn't remember it still. Uh, Needless to say, I don't care for The Greatest Showman that much. But I do have to give it credit for getting us on the point we are now within pop musicals. It and High School Musical, of course, and how these have, brought it throughout that time. That being the case, if I don't count the GOAT, because it's, the GOAT. Welcome to the show. I'm not really fond of any pop musicals. And yeah, I have listened to a lot of Descendants and Zombies because I've worked with kids in the past and before. So, I've heard those songs. That is, of course, until Huntrix and the Golden Hamoon, in which I... Hello? Uh-huh. Yeah? It's not called that. Okay. Alright, okay. Oh, right. Okay, thank you. That is until Demon Hunter Mugen Train. Huh? It's not called that either. Wrong franchise. Please don't call me an idiot. It makes me want to cry. Please, just yeah. Okay, yeah. That is until Kpop Demon Hunter, which does a great job with its pop music and its pop musical. Yes? I got it right that time? Okay, alright. How did you know I was recording? You know everything. Alright, okay. Alright, thank you. Yeah, okay. Love you too, Mom. Bye. None of that, though, is what I wanted to talk about. What I need to talk about was a strange post I saw once talking about a crossover between Demon Hunter and Miraculous. What got me with this post was that part of the reason they liked the crossover was that the teenagers of Marinette and Adrian in the gang would of course like K-pop more than garage band and this 80s idea, which they blamed Astruck for setting up. So how dare Miraculous have this such hatred over overly produced pop music? I'm over-exaggerating. Maybe strawmanning a little bit. Here is the thing. This choice of not liking pop music was made for Miraculous, not by accident. And in fact puts a different twist on the Miraculous Universe's approach to pop. of which would make it very interesting in a crossover with Kpop Demon Hunter. So in a way, I kind of agree with this post. But it also makes the crossover harder unless you're willing to actually delve into the histories of music here. That difference, though, would not have to do with music history, but with the delivery of the ideas, being Miraculous's very hammer and nail approach, lack of subtlety, and Demon Hunter's maybe strong and over heavily use of symbolism and more subtle deliveries of its ideas. So, the general history of garage band and rock music, from how I understand it, is that there was a bunch of kids who would get excited about making music and would form a group with their other friends excited about making music, and they would get their equipment, their music, their amps, their whatever, and go to their garages and create music with this group of friends that they had. As the availability of musical equipment and the ability for kids to meet and perform in places, didn't have to be garages, of their own, as these third places, as they've been called before, I believe. I don't have the research here, I'm sorry. Became smaller and smaller, the amount of rock bands that formed would become fewer and fewer. This would later, again, just from what I remember hearing and learning, would lead to dubstep or program-based music and stuff, where the equipment was more available and you didn't need at least like 4 other people with musical abilities and have them all have to meet up in one big area to perform it. At least I think that's how the history went. My sources are largely my own memory. I know I've heard and I've learned this stuff before, and I know I've heard somebody citing their sources when talking about this, but I don't remember what those sources were. I don't remember who said this or how to find that. So if I said anything wrong, go ahead and double check me in the comments as necessary. The point, though, is that part of what Miraculous, I think, is trying to get across is the idea of kids getting together with their friends and making their own music and just otherwise hanging out. That's why they have these garage bands, these bands that they form. This is more important and a better thing for society than marketed and produced music. That is why I think Astruct, and largely his team, has such an issue with produced music, and why we will probably never see Bob Roth become a sympathetic character. Again, I don't think this is very subtle, and whenever Roth comes up, it creates an issue. It is an issue in which there's a problem within the separation of music as something you do to become an artist, and you also need to make money, though, and then that greed of making all the money brings into this. Ostrich does not like capitalism, and the guy is not subtle about this in any shape or form. There are even more similarities between the relationship between Gabriel Gress and his son Adrian have towards fashion and modeling, and their relationships between mass marketing and Marinette's passion of a child who loves designing things for her friends, and how this could even relate to the band, as Marinette's involvement with the band isn't as a musician, but as a costume and a merchandise designer, and how they're not really trying to sell merch to make money, but Marinette wants to make things for them. They want to make music, and their friends making stuff for them, and they're making music, so they might as well all do it together, right? And this separation between how kids approach their passions and their hobbies versus how the world teaches us to deliver and market ourselves, and this competition is even outright stated in Miraculous. This has problems, though, when compared to Kpop Demon Hunter, in that Demon Hunter does not directly oppose the working and corruption of capitalism. That is, well, known to definitely populate K-pop. So it's not fair to say that Kpop Demon Hunter does not address these issues. Arguably, that is all Saja Boys depicts and explores. It's just that Kpop Demon Hunters explores more issues that could be in the industry, but they do so through symbolism, and largely through the symbolism of its antagonists. Saja Boys has a producer, I guess you could call him, that is literally the worst and king of all devils. And not even shown as a human, but as like a massive fire that burns. And Soulja Boy's songs, while not as hitting you over the head with a hammer obvious as Bo Burnham's Repeat Stuff music video, a line could be taken from Repeat Stuff and connected to both of Soulja Boy's songs with maybe a little bit of scrutiny on that line. Soda Pop already points to comparing you, the generic person, to a beverage that is passively consumed and then whose empty vessel is tossed aside. While not outwardly stated as such a thing that is happening in the song, this is kind of depicted on how demons view humans, as just vessels that contain what is necessary for their survival, souls as Soda Pop. I also like the idea of using products to represent and show how this song is just a flashy way of showing off the Soulja Boys. It doesn't really tell you anything about them, it just shows them off. The song almost comes off more as a commercial than a song, and I don't think it's going to be long before we start hearing it in some commercials. Won't that be fun and ironic and not disturbing? Then you have your idol, in which they reveal more obviously that their goal is to be the only thing that you listen to, that you come to with your problems, that you come to for comfort. They want to hack your emotional brain so that you associate their music as being the thing that gets you over a hard time. I also like how both songs, especially in comparison to Huntrick's songs, focus on a use of you and talking about you in a very generic way, in the way pop songs, especially boy bands from the 2010s, like to. How their songs could be talking about anyone and could even be talking about you.
I describe my dream girl as really, really vague. Like, I love your hands cause your fingerprints are like no other. I love your eyes and their bluish, brownish, greenish color.
This versus Huntrick's, which constantly talks about themselves and using music as a model of reflection on themselves, on their lives, on the direction of their lives. From here, I can take a look at Huntrick's final song called This Is What It Sounds Like. And I conclude that Kpop Demon Hunter is just a retelling of Tenacious D and the Pick of Destiny. I mean, look, think about it. Both end with a song off against the devil, and the devil cheats and starts physically fighting them, and had to be fought more directly as well. And you also had the good guys coming up with a song out of nowhere instead of writing it, even though beforehand we had seen them going through the music composition processes. I mean, where was I? Tenacious, what? Oh, sorry, that's, what I should say is that what it sounds like is getting across what really and truly attracts us to pop music in a good way compared to Soulja Boys. That is the story of the people who in pop and how their stories relate to us and our stories. This is pop that lasts versus pop that sells. Ideally, this is kind of what this comparison could be. How this is artistic music versus corporate-sponsored music.
You're never gonna bring me down. You're never gonna break this part of me.
The problem is, I don't feel like what it sounds like truly addresses any of the issues brought up by your idol. In your idol about confessing your sins or how you should be listening to it whenever you feel bad or are in a funk or whatever. How does what it sounds like not just commit or cause the same feelings of attachment and parasocial relation? So notice that the person writing this post that I mentioned forever ago didn't even give Miraculous the benefit of the doubt with their interpretation and understanding of the reason why Ostrich might not like produced pop work. Notice how I pointed out and argue that Miraculous is not really that subtle about why they dislike produced music. Could this lead to a problem with people interpreting Kpop Demon Hunters? Also, on top of all that, Kpop Demon Hunters is really interested in having its cake and eating it too. What I mean is, I feel like that as much as I like what it sounds like, I feel like it does not give a good answer to avoid the trouble that pop music especially pop music, that is largely controlled and made by producers more than artists. You still want to listen to what it sounds like and confess your sins. You still only want to listen to Huntrix. The way I see it, there are two types of problems with interpreting media that comes into fandoms. And that is that the first being refusing to engage with the material and getting mad at the media for asking for engagement at all when you refused. This is what I see with the Miraculous fandom whenever they give a very straightforward interpretation and don't really think about it. The second problem is just refusing to provide any interpretation or thought into the media and potentially throwing shade at those who try to provide interpretations because they're challenging. They both come from the same root of not wanting to engage. The difference is that when the media is not being subtle, the response is anger at the media for asking for engagement. Whereas when a media decides not to be subtle, there's no anger felt, but love for the media because they don't want to engage with it. And they don't have to. They're not asked to. Both are this problem with this lazy or unwillingness to engage. Demon Hunter greatly introduces the latter form of thinking, with its more subtle way of introducing and presenting its themes. Other themes are not as subtle involving Demon Hunter, like the idea of improvement, generational trauma, and the confronting of your true self and wanting to live as yourself instead of hiding who you are from the world. That also kind of relates very much so to the issues of pop and K-pop, and how overcoming those issues and just living as you are is the better solution than trying to pretend that you're a perfect person. However, this subtle approach does allow people to enjoy Demon Hunter more than Miraculous, but I don't think people are really enjoying Demon Hunter nearly as much as they could because they are not interested in looking into why they enjoy it so much, besides dopamine release valve, which is the whole idea of corporate pop. Now, however, Kpop Demon Hunter is starting to approach, or is on, depending on when this releases, their downward slide view that popular culture gets into after its boost in popularity. And as people get tired of Huntrix being everywhere, maybe try just a different approach to their music and to their movie, and see if you can't find more to love about it. Thank you for watching.
Feel the wave of sound as it crashes down. You can't turn